They thought humiliating the new black girl in the hallway would make them the kings of North Valley High. They laughed as they ripped her shirt, surrounded by classmates too afraid to speak up, convinced no one would ever challenge them. But arrogance has a funny way of collapsing when the person you target refuses to break, and when the truth is far more dangerous than you imagined. What started as another cruel act of bullying quickly uncovered a web of intimidation, missing evidence, and secrets the entire school had buried for years. Stay with me until the very end, because the final twist changes everything, and trust me, you won't see it coming. The first bell had not even rung when Kiara Bennett stepped into the main hallway of North Valley High and felt every eye turn toward her. She wore a clean white shirt, blue jeans, and carried an old backpack with one faded strap stitched by hand. Nothing about her looked loud. Nothing about her asked for attention. But in that hallway, being quiet did not make her invisible. It made her a target. Rows of steel lockers stretched down both sides like a tunnel. And the morning crowd moved around her in waves of expensive sneakers, varsity jackets, perfumi, laughter, and whispers. Kiara held her schedule in one hand and a stack of books in the other, reading the room before she read the numbers on the doors. She noticed who walked like they owned the place. She noticed who moved aside before being told. And she noticed the tall boy in the orange and white varsity jacket leaning against the lockers, smiling at her like he had just found something to break. Damon Whitlock did not need to ask who she was. New students always had a certain look, and Kiara had it alone. Careful, was unfamiliar with the rules everyone else had learned the hard way. Beside him, Cole Mercer and Trent Hale followed his stare. Cole smirked first. Trent lifted his phone halfway, not recording yet. Just ready. Damon pushed away from the lockers and stepped into Kiara's path. She moved to the right. He moved with her. She moved left. He blocked her again. Lost? He asked. Loud enough for the students nearby to slow down. Kiara looked at him once. Calm and direct. History class, she said. Room 214. Damon glanced at her backpack, then at hair shirt, then at the books in her arms. Figure. New girl shows up dressed like she found her school supplies in a donation box. A few students laughed. Not because it was funny, but because Damon had trained them well. Kiara did not smile. She did not shrink. She tried to step around him. That was when Damon drove his shoulder into hers. The impact knocked the books from Kiara's arms. They hit the polished floor hard, pages spreading beneath the lockers as if the hallway itself had swallowed them. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then the laughter grew. Damon looked down at the mess with fake surprise. Careful, he said. People here don't like drama before first period. Kiara crouched slowly and began gathering her books. Her fingers did not shake. That bothered Damon more than tears would have. Emma Collins, standing near the opposite row of lockers with her phone clutched to her chest, took one step forward to help. Cole saw her immediately. He did not say a word. He only tilted his head and stared. The kind of stare that reminded Emma exactly what happened to people who crossed Damon Whitlock. Emma stopped, her face filled with guilt, but her feet stayed frozen. Kiara noticed. She noticed everything. Damon crouched halfway, close enough to make it look like he was helping, then slid one of her notebooks farther away with his shoe. You should learn something fast, he said. North Valley has levels. Some people walk through these halls. Some people keep their heads down. Kiara picked up the notebook without looking away from him. Around them, the crowd had thickened, phones hidden near chests, eyes hungry for the first scandal of the week. At the far end of the hallway, Grace Miller, the history teacher, appeared with a folder under her arm. She saw the books on the floor. She saw Damon standing over Kiara. She saw Cole and Trent smiling. Her expression tightened, but only for a moment. Everyone at North Valley knew Damon's father had just funded the new stadium lights. Everyone knew the Whitlock name could open doors, close investigations, and make adults suddenly forget what they had witnessed. Damon, Ms. Miller said carefully. Get to glass. Not are you okay? Kiara, not. What happened here? Just Damon's name. Spoken like a warning, she was afraid to finish. Damon gave her a lazy salute. Sir, Ms. Miller. Just welcoming the new student. Kiara rose with her books pressed against her chest. The hallway expected embarrassment. It expected anger. It expected the new girl to lower her eyes and disappear into the crowd. Instead, Kiara looked at Damon with a stillness so sharp, the laughter began to die on its own. People who need a crowd to scare one girl, she said quietly, are usually terrified of the truth when they have to stand alone. The words were not shouted. That made them worse. They landed cleanly, right in front of everyone. Cole's smirk faded. Trent lowered his phone. Emma's eyes widened as if she had just watched someone touch a live wire and refused to burn. Damon's jaw tightened. For the first time that morning, the hallway was not laughing with him. It was waiting to see what he would do next. Ms. Miller stepped closer, suddenly nervous. Gera, room 214 is this way, she said. Trying to pull the moment apart before it became something bigger, Kiara gave Damon one last look, then walked past him without brushing his shoulder. Without rushing. Without giving him the satisfaction of fear. Students moved aside for her now, not out of kindness, but out of shock. Damon stood still, feeling the silence press against him harder than any insult. He had meant to embarrass her in front of North Valley. Instead, she had made him look small in the one place where he believed he was untouchable. Cole leaned in and muttered, "Let it go." Man. Damon's eyes followed Kiara as she disappeared around the corner with Miss Crydet. Mila, his voice came low, bitter, and certain. Before the final bell rings, he said, "I'm gonna make that girl cry in the middle of this hallway." Trent swallowed, sensing this was no longer a joke. Emma looked down at the floor, where one torn corner of Kiara's schedule had been left behind. But Damon did not know the truth. Kiara Bennett had not come to North Valley just to start a new school. She had come because something inside those walls had been buried for months, and the people who buried it were about to learn that she was not the kind of girl who stayed quiet. By lunchtime, Kiara Bennett had already learned one thing about North Valley High. Silence here was not peaceful. It was trained. The cafeteria was loud with trays, chairs, laughter, and conversations bouncing off the white walls. But beneath all that noise was something colder. Students knew where to sit. They knew who not to look at. They knew which table belonged to Damon Whitlock long before he entered the room. Kiara chose a small table near the far end of the cafeteria, close to a tall support column and away from the main crowd. She opened her lunch, placed her books beside her tray, and kept her eyes on the room without looking afraid. That alone was enough to irritate Damon. He walked in with Cole Mercer on one side and Trent Hale on the other, their orange and white varsity jackets cutting through the cafeteria like warning signs. Damon spotted Kiara immediately. He smiled, but it was not friendly. It was the kind of smile people wore when they wanted an audience before they did something cruel. "There she is," he said. "North Valley's newest mystery." Cole pulled out his phone as they approached, holding it low against his chest so it looked casual. Trent circled the table from the other side, pretending to check the seats. Kiara saw the movement, saw the phone, saw the way nearby. Students suddenly became very interested in their food. Damon placed both hands on her table and leaned down. "So, Gera, right. You always sit alone. Or did everyone figure you out before lunch?" Kiara closed her lunch container slowly. "I'm eating," she said. Damon laughed as if she had told a joke. "Relax. We're just being welcoming. People might think you're unfriendly." Cole tilted the phone slightly. The red recording dot was reflected for half a second in the metal edge of Kiara's tray. She noticed, but she did not react. Damon began asking questions that sounded harmless, only if nobody listened closely. Where did she come from? Why transfer so suddenly? Did she get kicked out of her old school? Was the backpack a vintage look or just all she had? Every word was wrapped in fake politeness, delivered loud enough for the cafeteria to hear. Kiara answered none of it. Her silence made Damon push harder. Trent moved behind her chair and gave her tray a small shove with his hip. The cup on the tray tipped, spilling cold water across the table and down the front of Kiara's white shirt. The cafeteria gasped first, then laughed in broken waves when Damon raised his hands dramatically. Whoa, careful, new girl. You're kind of making a scene. Kiara looked down at the water spreading across her shirt. Then at Trent, then at Damon. She stood up slowly, picked up her books, and tried to leave. Damon stepped in front of her, blocking the narrow path between tables. He wanted her to push him. He wanted her hand on his chest. Here, hang on, Vicho. Her face twisted into the version of the story he could sell later. Leaving already, he said. That's rude. Kiara glanced once at Cole's phone. Then she looked directly into the lens. Keep recording, she said, her voice calm enough to cut through the noise. One day, your own video is going to speak for me. The cafeteria went still for half a breath. Cole's smile weakened. Trent looked at Damon, unsure if they had lost control of the joke. Damon's eyes hardened. He leaned closer and whispered, "You think cameras save people here?" Kiara did not answer. She stepped around him, but not before a movement near the support column caught her eye. Emma Collins stood half hidden behind it. Her phone raised with both hands, shaking so badly the screen trembled. She was recording from a different angle. She was terrified, but she had not stopped. That small act of courage lasted only seconds before the adults arrived too late. As they often did at North Valley, Ms. Grace Miller pushed through the cafeteria crowd, her expression tight when she saw the water on Kiara's shirt and Damon standing in her path. "What happened?" she asked. But Damon answered before Kiara could speak. She spilled water on herself and started blaming people. He said smoothly, "We were just trying to help." Cole nodded. Trent added, "She got aggressive." A few students nearby mumbled agreement without looking up. They were not witnesses. They were survivors following the rules. Kiara studied their faces and understood something ugly. This place did not protect Damon because he was always believed. It protected him because everyone else had learned the cost of telling the truth. "Miss." Miller looked from Damon to Kiara, caught between what she suspected and what she was afraid to challenge. "Getta," she said carefully, "maybe you should go clean up before next period." The sentence landed like a verdict. Damon's mouth curled. Kiara did not argue. She gathered her backpack, her damp shirt clinging coldly to her skin, and walked out while the cafeteria parted for her in silence. Emma lowered her phone and stepped back behind the column, breathing hard. Damon watched Kiara go, enjoying the way the room seemed to bend around him again. Then his eyes dropped to the floor near her chair. A folded paper had slipped from the side pocket of her old backpack. He picked it up, expecting homework or a schedule. Instead, across the top of the page, in bold black letters, were the words "North Valley Complaint File." Damon's smile disappeared. Cole leaned over his shoulder. "What is that?" Damon folded the paper quickly and shoved it into his jacket. The game had changed. Kiara was not just some new girl who needed to be humiliated. She was carrying something about North Valley. Something connected to the silence. Everyone had worked so hard to keep... And from that moment on, Damon no longer wanted to make her cry. He wanted to find out exactly what she knew. After lunch, room 214 felt less like a history classroom and more like a room waiting for a verdict. Kiara Bennett sat near the middle row with her damp shirt mostly hidden beneath her open jacket. Her books stacked neatly on the desk as if nothing had happened in the cafeteria. But everyone knew. The whispers followed her through the door, soft and quick, dying only when Ms. Grace Miller wrote 2 words on the board: "Civil rights." Damon Whitlock sat 3 rows behind Kiara. One ankle crossed over his knee, spinning a black pen between his fingers. Cole Mercer took the seat beside Emma Collins, not because he liked history, but because he wanted to remind her that her phone, her silence, and her fear all belonged to Damon now. Trent Hale leaned back near the window, watching the room like it was another stage. "Miss?" Miller turned to the class and said, "Today, we're talking about fairness. citizenship. And what happens when institutions fail the people they're supposed to protect? The words should have been ordinary. In that room, they sounded dangerous. Damon gave a short laugh. So basically, he said, loud enough for everyone. We're talking about people who make everything about being victims. The classroom froze. Ms. Miller's marker stopped midair. A few students looked down at their desks. Damon smiled, pretending he had not aimed the sentence at anyone. Kiara did not turn around. She simply looked at the board. Calm. Still impossible to read. Ms. Miller tried to pull the lesson back. This is a discussion. Damon, not an accusation, but Damon leaned forward. Enjoying the attention? I'm just saying. Some people walk into a place and start acting like the whole system is against them. Maybe the problem isn't the system. Maybe they just want special treatment. That time, Kiara turned down. Not fast. Not angry. Just enough to make the room hold its breath. Power doesn't always look like a law. She said. Sometimes it looks like a hallway full of people who know the truth and pretend they didn't see it. Damon's pen stopped spinning. Ms. Miller's face tightened. Kiara continued. Her voice even, and sometimes unfairness survives because the people with power convince everyone else that speaking up is the same as causing trouble. Nobody laughed now. Damon's smile hardened into something uglier. For the second time that day, Kiara had made him look small without raising her voice. Cole shifted in his chair. Emma stared at her notebook, but her hand was gripping her pencil so tightly the wood almost cracked. Ms. Miller cleared her throat. That is a strong point, she said, though her voice carried more fear than approval. Damon's face flushed. He tore a corner from his notebook, wrote something quickly, folded it twice, and flicked it across the room. The paper hit Kiara's desk and slid against her hand. Kiara opened it without looking back. 4 words were written in dark ink. Stop digging or you'll regret it. For a moment, the classroom noise disappeared. She folded the note again, stood up, and walked it to Miss Brive. Miller's desk. This was just thrown at me, she said. Ms. Miller read it. Her eyes moved, then lifted toward Damon. He spread his hands with perfect innocence. What I didn't do anything. A couple of students gave nervous laughs. Ms. Miller looked at the note again, then at Kiara, then toward the door as if help might be standing there. I'll handle it after class, she said quietly. Please sit down. The decision landed hard. Kiara did not argue, but something in her eyes changed. She was beginning to understand that North Valley's adults did not always deny the truth because they failed to see it. Sometimes they saw it clearly and chose survival. Damon leaned back, satisfied. His family name had done its job again without anyone saying it out loud. But across the room, Emma had noticed something small. The ink on the note was not ordinary black. It had a faint blue streak through it. The same uneven mark left by the pen Damon had been spinning all period. Emma looked from the note to Damon's desk, her lips parting as if she might finally speak. Cole's hand came down on her desk before she could move. Not hard, just heavy enough. You didn't see anything, he whispered. Emma's face went pale. She lowered her eyes. But her silence was no longer empty. It was filling with guilt. The rest of class dragged like a warning. Ms. Miller continued the lesson. But nobody heard much of it. Damon watched Kiara as if he were planning where to strike next. Kiara copied the final notes from the board. Though her mind was elsewhere, the cafeteria video, the missing courage in the room, the paper Damon had stolen from her bag, and now the threat. When the bell rang, chairs scraped back all at once. Students rushed out, grateful to escape the pressure. Kiara packed slowly. She knew Damon would wait. He did. As she reached the doorway, he stepped close enough for only her to hear. West hallway, he whispered. No cameras there. Meet me after this period. Kiara looked at him, then passed him toward Emma, who stood frozen by her desk, with fear all over her face. Damon's threat was not just about her anymore. It was about the whole school. Kiara slid her books into her backpack and walked into the hallway without answering. She knew it was a trap. She knew he wanted her alone. But for the first time since arriving at North Valley, Kiara wanted to see exactly how far Damon Whitlock and the people protecting him were willing to go. The west hallway of North Valley High was quieter than the rest of the school. And that was exactly why Damon Whitlock had chosen it. The lockers there were older. The ceiling lights flickered in uneven strips. And most students avoided the area unless they had no other route. Kiara Bennett knew that before she turned the corner. She had watched enough faces that day to understand how fear shaped traffic inside the building. Students did not simply walk through North Valley. They followed invisible rules. Some halls were safe. Some tables were claimed. Some names were never challenged. And the west hallway, with its blind corner and empty trophy case, had become one of Damon's favorite places to remind people who controlled the school. Kiara walked in anyway. Her books were tight against her chest, her old backpack hanging from one shoulder. At the far end, Damon stepped out from between two rows of lockers. Cole Mercer moved behind her, cutting off the way back. Trent Hale leaned against the wall with his phone already raised. The lens pointed low and careful, capturing only what Damon wanted seen. "You actually came," Damon said, almost impressed. Kiara stopped in the middle of the hallway. "You told me to..." Damon smiled. "That doesn't mean smart people. Listen." He took 2 steps closer and reached for her backpack. Kiara turned slightly. But Cole grabbed the strap from behind and yanked it off her shoulder. The bag hit the floor, and Damon snatched it up before she could reach down. "Give it back," Kiara said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes had sharpened. Damon unzipped the front pocket and began digging through her things. "You've been carrying papers around like you're some kind of investigator," he said. "Complaint files, notes, little secrets. Who sent you here?" "Kiara." She stepped toward him. Cole blocked her with his shoulder. Trent kept recording from the side, careful to frame Kiara's face and not Damon's hands. A few students appeared at the far end of the hall, then stopped when they saw who was involved. Damon pulled out a folded paper, glanced at it, then laughed without humor. "You really think you have the right to dig into this school?" he asked. "You showed up today, one day, and now you're acting like North Valley owes you answers." Kiara held out her hand. "That belongs to me." Damon lifted the paper higher. "No, this belongs to North Valley now." He stepped closer until there was barely any space between them. "You should have stayed quiet after the cafeteria." Kiara looked past him at Trent's phone. "Still filming from the angle that makes you look innocent." Trent's mouth twitched. Damon's face darkened. He grabbed the front of Kiara's white shirt near the collar and pulled her toward the camera. "Say that again." "Hey, he said." "Say it while everyone can see how crazy you look." Kiara grabbed his wrist. Not to attack him, but to stop him from pulling her closer. Cole shouted. "She's grabbing him." Trent shifted the phone fast, catching only Kiara's hand on Damon's wrist. Damon yanked harder. There was a sharp tearing sound. It cut through the hallway louder than a scream. Kiara's shirt ripped across the shoulder and down the front, exposing enough that she instantly pulled the fabric against herself with both hands. The students at the end of the hallway froze. Even Trent lowered the phone for half a second. Damon blinked, surprised by how far it had gone. Then his instincts took over. "She did that herself," he said quickly, stepping back. "You all saw it. She pulled her own shirt to set me up." Kiara stood there with her torn shirt clutched to her chest, humiliation burning behind her eyes. But she did not cry. That made Damon panic more than tears would have. For one terrible moment, the hallway seemed ready to obey him. The students at the far end looked away. Cole nodded too fast. Trent lifted the phone again, now recording Kiara's torn shirt and Damon's fake innocence. "She's trying to ruin him," Cole said loudly. "She came here with some file and planned this." Kiara's fingers tightened around the ripped fabric. "You tore it," she said. Damon pointed at her. "Prove it." That was when a voice cracked from near the corner. No, Emma Collins stood half-hidden beside the trophy case. Her face pale, her phone raised in both shaking hands. I saw everything. He grabbed her first. Cole spun toward her. "Emma, don't." But Emma, trembling and nearly crying, kept the phone up. "I recorded it." The sentence changed the air. Damon's eyes flashed. Cole moved before anyone else could think. He crossed the hall, slapped the phone from Emma's hands, and sent it skidding across the floor. Emma gasped and reached for it. But Cole shoved his foot in front of her. Damon bent down, his hand already stretching toward the phone. If he deleted the video, the hallway would become just another North Valley story with no proof, no witness, and no consequence. Kiara took one step forward, still holding her torn shirt together. "Don't touch it," she said. Damon looked up at her and smiled coldly, or what his fingers closed over the edge of the phone. Then a man's voice echoed from behind him. Low, calm, and powerful enough to stop every breath in the hallway. "Touch that evidence, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Damon froze. Slowly, he turned, expecting a security guard. Maybe a teacher, someone his father could dismiss with one phone call. But the man walking toward them wore a sheriff's uniform, a badge on his chest, and the kind of expression that made even guilty people stand still. Kiara looked at him through the shock and whispered one word. "Dad." Sheriff Malcolm Bennett did not run down the west hallway. He did not shout. He did not reach for his weapon. He walked toward the frozen circle of students with a calm so heavy it pushed the fear out of the air and replaced it with something worse for Damon Whitlock: accountability. His badge caught the flickering hallway lights, but his eyes were locked on Kiara. She stood in the middle of the hallway with one hand clutching the torn front of her white shirt and the other gripping her book so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. For one second, the sheriff was not an officer. He was a father seeing his daughter humiliated in a place that was supposed to protect her. But even then, he did not lose control. He removed his uniform jacket, stepped around Damon without touching him, and gently placed it over Kiara's shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Kiara shook her head, but her voice was low when she answered, "Not like that." Emma Collins stood near the trophy case, trembling, her phone still on the floor, under Damon's shadow. Cole Mercer had gone still. Trent Hale had lowered his phone, suddenly unsure if recording was brave or stupid. Damon forced a laugh and lifted both hands. "Okay, this is getting dramatic," he said. "This is a school thing. Students argue. You can't just walk in here and act like this is some crime scene." Sheriff Bennett finally turned to him. "You're standing over a phone that may contain evidence. Step back." Damon's mouth tightened. He was used to adults softening around his last name. This man did not soften. Kiara pulled the sheriff's jacket closed around herself and looked at her father. Her voice was quiet. But in the silence of the hallway, everyone heard it. "Dad, I told you they were hiding something." The sentence landed harder than any scream. A few students looked at Damon. Cole swallowed. Trent's face lost color. Damon stared from Kiara to the sheriff, and the arrogance drained from him in pieces. He had not just grabbed some new girl. He had not just torn the shirt of someone with no one behind her. He had done it to the daughter of the county sheriff. For the first time all day, Damon looked young, trapped, and very aware that his father was not standing beside him yet. "That's not what happened," he said quickly. "She set this up. She came here with some file. She was trying to start trouble." Sheriff Bennett looked down at Emma's phone, then at Trent's phone, then at the scattered students who had watched too much and said too little. "Nobody leaves," he said. "Phones stay where they are until an administrator arrives." That was when Vice Principal Linda Carver came rushing around the corner, heels striking the floor like she was angry at the hallway itself. She took in the scene, Kiara covered in a sheriff's jacket, Damon pale, Emma near tears, the phone on the floor, and somehow her first question was not for Kiara. "Everyone disperse." Carver snapped. No one posts anything. No one sends anything. This is a private disciplinary matter. Sheriff Bennett did not raise his voice. No. This hallway stays as it is. Carver's eyes flashed. Sheriff, with respect, you are not school administration. You cannot come into our building and start collecting students' phones. With respect, he replied, a student may have been assaulted. A witness's phone may contain evidence, and another student attempted to interfere with that evidence. So yes, I can ensure nothing is destroyed before the proper process begins. Carver stepped closer, lowering her voice as if the students could not still hear every word. You are making this worse. These are minors. This is not a public spectacle. Kiara watched her carefully. Not once had Carver asked if she needed a nurse. Not once had she asked who tore the shirt. Her only concern was control. Damon seemed to notice it too, because a little confidence returned to his face. See, he said. Even she knows this is being blown out of proportion. Sheriff Bennett looked at him for a long second. I didn't come here by accident. Damon. Carver's expression changed before she could hide it. What does that mean? Sheriff Bennett turned slightly so the watching students could hear him clearly. For 3 months, my office has received anonymous complaints about North Valley High. Bullying, intimidation, missing footage. Students pressured not to report what happened to them. The hallway went completely silent. Emma looked up, stunned. Cole stared at the floor. Trent stopped pretending he had not been recording. Damon's face hardened again. But this time, it was fear wearing anger as a mask. Carver swallowed and looked toward the ceiling camera at the far end of the hall. That camera hasn't worked since this morning. She said too quickly. Sheriff Bennett's eyes moved from the camera back to her. He did not smile. He did not blink. That's strange. He said, I never asked about the camera. Carver's face went pale. The students understood it before anyone explained it. She had defended an excuse no one had accused her of making yet. What had started as a torn shirt in a quiet hallway was no longer just bullying. It was beginning to look like a cover-up. And everyone standing there knew the first mistake had just come from an adult. Principal Rebecca Sloane's office looked too polished for the kind of truth being dragged into it. The walls were lined with framed awards, smiling team photos, and a large blueprint of the new Whitlock Stadium renovation, as if the room itself had been built to remind everyone who mattered at North Valley High. Kiara Bennett sat near the edge of a leather chair with Sheriff Bennett's jacket still wrapped around her torn shirt. Emma Collins sat beside Ms. Grace Miller, her hands locked together so tightly her fingers had turned white. Damon Whitlock occupied the chair across from Kiara, trying to look bored, but his eyes kept darting toward his phone, toward Vice Principal Carver, toward the door. Sheriff Bennett stood behind his daughter, Celia, watching the room the way trained men watched crime scenes, not for what people said, but for what they avoided. Principal Sloane folded her hands on the desk and gave Kiara a soft, practiced smile. I think we all need to take a breath, she said. This appears to be a tense misunderstanding between students that escalated far beyond what anyone intended. Kiara did not blink. Her shirt had been torn in a hallway. Her witness had been intimidated. Her evidence had almost been taken, but Sloane had already found the safest word, misunderstanding. Then the principal slid a printed statement across the desk. Kiara, if you'll just sign this, we can document that emotions were high, that you confronted Damon, and that both sides contributed to the incident. Kiara picked up the paper and read the first line. Her face went still. This says I provoked him. Sloane's smile tightened. It says there was mutual conflict. Kiara placed the paper back on the desk. I'm not signing a lie. The door opened before Sloane could respond, and Grant Whitlock entered without knocking. He wore a dark tailored suit, a silver watch, and the relaxed confidence of a man who had never needed permission in that building. Damon's posture changed immediately, as if his father's presence had plugged him back into power. Grant did not look at Kiara first. He looked at the framed stadium blueprint on the wall, then at Sloane, then at Sheriff Bennett. I came as soon as I heard there was an issue," he said, though his tone made it sound less like concern and more like ownership. Sloan stood too quickly. "Mr. Whitlock, thank you for coming." Grant gave Damon a brief look, then turned to the sheriff. "Malcolm, isn't it? Let's be careful here. I respect law enforcement, but I won't let a boy's future be destroyed over a torn shirt and teenage drama." The room went cold. Kiara felt the words hit harder than the hallway laughter. A torn shirt. Teenage drama. Her humiliation had been reduced to fabric, as if the hand that grabbed her, the fear in Emma's eyes, and the silence of the school were all just inconvenient details. Sheriff Bennett reached down, took the printed statement from the desk, and read it slowly. No one spoke. Not Damon, not Sloan, not Carver. When he finished, he set it back in front of the principal. "Who wrote this before?" "My daughter gave her statement," he asked. Sloan's eyes flickered toward Carver. Carver looked at a file cabinet. Grant adjusted his cuff. Damon stared at the floor. The silence answered for all of them. Emma suddenly lifted her head. Her voice was small, but it cut through the room. "I recorded it." Damon's head snapped toward her. Cole had taken her phone in the hallway, she explained. But the video had been set to auto backup. For the first time since Grant entered, Damon looked truly scared. Sloan leaned forward immediately. "Emma, that's very helpful. Give me your cloud password and we'll verify the footage through the school." Emma hesitated, already reaching for her phone. Sheriff Bennett's hand came up, calm but firm. "No." Sloan stiffened. "Sheriff, we need to review the material. Then she can open it herself. And everyone can watch from here," he said. "No student is handing over private account access under pressure." Emma swallowed and nodded. "Miss?" Miller moved the office laptop toward her. The room became so quiet that the clicking of keys sounded like a countdown. Emma typed her login, opened the storage folder, and searched for the cafeteria clip first. Then the West Hallway clip. Her breathing changed. She clicked again, then again. The folder was empty. Not moved. Not hidden. Empty. Emma's lips parted. "It was here," she whispered. "I swear it was here." Damon let out a shaky breath he tried to disguise as a laugh. Grant's face returned to calm. Sloan folded her hands again. But this time, her smile was gone. Kiara looked around the office, from the principal to Carver, to Damon's father, and understood the danger clearly. The only video that could save her had vanished in front of everyone, and whoever erased it might not have been a student at all. This time, the person protecting Damon could be sitting in the same room, pretending to investigate the truth. The security room sat behind a locked gray door near the administrative wing. Far from the polished awards and framed donor photos in Principal Sloan's office, it smelled of dust, warm plastic, and old coffee. Rows of monitors covered one wall, each showing a different corner of North Valley High. The main entrance, the cafeteria, the gym doors, the parking lot, and 3 silent hallways where students moved like nothing unusual had happened. But the West Hallway screen was black. A small message blinked in the corner. Signal error. Galabortis, the school's young IT technician, stood beside the control desk, with his hands shoved into his pockets and sweat shining along his hairline. He could not have been more than 24, and he looked like someone who had spent the last year learning that school politics could be more frightening than broken machines. Sheriff Bennett stood in front of the monitors, Kiara at his side, in his jacket. Emma behind them with her arms folded tightly across herself. Sloan, Carver, Damon, and Grant Whitlock had followed them in, each carrying a different version of the same fear. "We need the system logs," Sheriff Bennett said. Caleb clicked the mouse too quickly. "The West Hallway camera has been down since this morning," he said. "It happens sometimes. Old wiring." Kiara watched him as he spoke. His eyes never stayed on one person for more than a second. Sheriff Bennett's voice remained calm. "What time did the failure start?" Caleb's fingers froze above the keyboard. Around early isn't a time. Carver stepped in immediately. Sheriff, Caleb is not on trial. The camera failed. That is unfortunate. But it does not justify turning this school into an investigation scene. Grant Whitlock gave a dry laugh. Exactly. You don't have a warrant. Malcolm, you have a family argument wrapped in a badge. Damon stood behind his father, trying to borrow his confidence, but his eyes stayed fixed on the blank west hallway screen. Sheriff Bennett did not look offended. I'm not searching private property, he said. I'm requesting preservation of potential evidence in an incident involving a possible assault, witness, intimidation, and interference with a recording device. Grant's smile thinned. Careful with your words. I am, the sheriff replied. That's why they're accurate. The room tightened. Sloan tried to smooth it over, saying the school would cooperate fully through official channels. But Sheriff Bennett kept his focus on Caleb. Open the log. Caleb swallowed and pulled up a window filled with timestamps and user access records. His hand trembled once on the mouse. Get aside. More importantly, Carver saw Kiara see it. Caleb, Carver said sharply, show him the camera failure report. Not every internal system file. Caleb nodded too fast. Sheriff Bennett stepped slightly closer. Nobody asked you to filter the truth for me. Caleb's face changed then. Not enough for Damon to notice, but enough for Kiara. Shame. Fear. A person trapped between a paycheck and a conscience. He scrolled to the west hallway entry. The screen read, File corrupted user marked. Sheriff Bennett leaned in. User marked, he said. That means it didn't corrupt automatically. Caleb stopped breathing for a second. A minute later, Caleb asked for water. It was a weak excuse. But Sheriff Bennett followed him into the narrow hallway outside the security room. Kiara stayed near the doorway, close enough to see Caleb's face crumble. The camera wasn't broken. Caleb whispered. It recorded everything. Sheriff Bennett did not interrupt. Caleb rubbed both hands over his face. I was told to flag the West Hallway file as corrupted and remove it from the review queue. I didn't delete it myself, but I marked it so nobody would pull it during a normal search. Who told you, Caleb? Look back at the closed security room door. Vice Principal Carver. The name hit Kiara like a second humiliation. This was not just Damon being cruel. Adults had built a system around his cruelty and called it procedure. Caleb's voice shook. Mr. Whitlock funded the camera upgrade last year. Carver said if I didn't follow instructions, the department would be restructured. I have a mother on dialysis. I need this job. Kiara wanted to be angry at him. And she was. But beneath it was something heavier. How many students had stood in hallways like hers, waiting for proof that had been quietly labeled corrupted by someone afraid to lose a paycheck? Sheriff Bennett asked, Do you still have the original Caleb's eyes lowered? No, the local file was overwritten. Kiara's stomach dropped. Inside the room, Grant's voice rose, demanding to know what was taking so long. Caleb looked at the sheriff, then at Kiara. But there might be one more copy. He whispered, The system sends an automatic backup to the county server every day at 2 o'clock. Sheriff Bennett glanced at his watch. Iwu Ling. 2 minutes. Caleb's face went pale again. If someone shuts down the school server before then, the backup won't send. At the end of the hall, the lights flickered once, and from inside the security room, Carver's voice cut sharply through the door. Caleb, get back in here now. Kiara looked at the clock on the wall. 10 minutes remained before the truth either escaped North Valley or disappeared forever. Caleb Ortiz did not wait for permission. The second Sheriff Bennett understood what was happening. Caleb pushed through the side door and led Kiara and Emma down the back stairwell toward the basement. The air changed with every step. Upstairs, North Valley High looked polished, bright, and expensive. Down here, beneath the trophies and donor plaques, the walls were bare concrete. The lights buzzed. and the pipes groaned like the building was hiding things in its bones. "The server room is at the end of this hall," Caleb said, nearly breathless. "If the backup reaches the county server at 2, the west hallway footage leaves the school network. After that, nobody here can touch it." Sheriff Bennett checked his watch. Iwu Sen. 7 minutes. Kiara held his jacket tighter around her torn shirt and kept moving. Emma followed close behind, clutching her phone like it was the only honest thing left in the building. When they reached the heavy metal door marked authorized personnel only, Caleb stopped dead. The door was locked from the inside. A faint scraping sound came from beyond it. Then a voice, Cole Mercer. "Hold on. I'm looking for it." Caleb's face drained. "He's inside." Sheriff Bennett stepped to the door. "Go. Open it." The noise inside stopped. A second later, Cole answered too casually. "Can't. We're getting equipment for the media club." Vice Principal Carver said it was fine. Kiara looked at Caleb. Caleb shook his head hard. "There's no media equipment in there." From behind the door came Trent's nervous whisper, then the sound of something being dragged across the floor. Caleb pressed his ear near the frame and went pale. "They're at the power rack." Sheriff Bennett's voice dropped. "Go. Listen carefully. If you unplug that system, you may be interfering with evidence." Cole hesitated, but only for a second. "I don't know what you're talking about." Somewhere above them, footsteps echoed down the stairs. Carver's voice appeared before she did. "Sheriff, this is completely inappropriate. Those boys had permission to retrieve school property, then open the door," he said. Carver's lips tightened. "I don't have the key." Caleb turned on her. "You're the only administrator with override access after hours?" The accusation hung there. Carver's eyes flashed toward him with a warning so sharp he stepped back. The clock on Caleb's phone read 1:57. 3 minutes. Inside, Cole was now speaking to someone on the phone, his voice shaky. "Which cable? There are like 6 of them." Kiara's stomach clenched. This was no longer rumor. No longer intimidation disguised as school discipline. They were trying to erase her in real time. Emma suddenly backed away, hands shaking. "I'm calling Ms. Mela?" she whispered. "Someone else needs to hear this." She put the phone on speaker, her voice cracking as she begged the teacher to come to the basement. "Now." Caleb dropped to his knees and opened a side maintenance panel, trying to access the emergency release. "If they kill the power before 2, the backup fails," he said. "The original is gone. The cloud folder is empty, and the server copy never leaves the building." Sheriff Bennett looked at the door. "Cole. Last warning. Step away from the equipment." A loud click came from inside. The hallway lights flickered. "Caleb froze?" "No," he whispered. The server room went silent. For one awful second, Kiara thought the truth had died behind that locked door. Then Emma's phone buzzed. She looked down, confused. A draft email notification had appeared on her screen. Caleb snatched a glance at it, and his expression changed. "Wait," he said. "Your phone was connected to the school Wi-Fi when Cole knocked it away." Emma blinked. "So, some mail apps autosave media previews into drafts when a file is being attached." He grabbed the phone gently, never taking it from her hands, and guided her through the email app. There, under unsent drafts, was a message with no recipient, no subject, and one small video preview still loading. Emma tapped it. The clip opened. The image shook, tilted, then sharpened Damon in the west hallway, his hand gripping Kiara's shirt. The room seemed to stop breathing. A few seconds later, Damon's voice came through the speaker. Clear and cruel. "You think cameras save people here?" Kiara looked up slowly. Even Carver had gone pale. The video had survived, but it had captured more than the tear, more than the assault, more than the lie. It had recorded the one sentence Damon Whitlock never wanted anyone to hear. The emergency discipline room had never felt smaller. Everyone sat around the long table as Emma's recovered draft video played from the laptop. its shaky frame filling the screen at the front of the room. No one spoke when Damon Whitlock appeared in the west hallway, blocking Kiara between the lockers with Cole and Trent behind her. No one spoke when he snatched her backpack, dug through her papers, and stepped into her space like the hallway belonged to him. And no one breathed when his hand closed around the front of her white shirt and pulled hard enough to tear it. The sound of fabric ripping filled the room again. Thin and brutal. Kiara kept her eyes on the table. Sheriff Bennett standing behind her chair with both hands resting calmly on the back of it. Damon stared at the screen as if the video had betrayed him personally. Grant Whitlock's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt until Damon's voice came through the speakers. Clear enough for every person in the room to hear. You think cameras save people here? My dad paid for this system. Nothing exists if the Whitlocks don't want it to. The video ended. Silence followed, heavier than shouting. Grant was the first to move. He leaned back slowly, smoothing his tie, as if dignity could repair what the room had just heard. Teenagers say reckless things when they're angry. He said, "My son was posturing." That line means nothing. Sheriff Bennett looked at Caleb. Replay the last 15 seconds. Grant's eyes sharpened. That isn't necessary. It is, the sheriff said, because that statement suggests possible influence over evidence retention, access, and internal reporting. Caleb replayed it. Damon's voice filled the room again. Nothing exists if the Whitlocks don't want it to. This time, Sloane looked away. Carver folded her arms and turned on Caleb. This entire situation has been mishandled by IT. She snapped. Mr. Ortiz had no authorization to involve outside systems or recover student media. He compromised school protocol. Caleb's face went pale. I didn't. You marked a file corrupted. Carver cut in. You tampered with the system. Caleb lowered his eyes, trapped by the very order he had obeyed. Kiara stood before Sheriff Bennett could speak. The jacket slipped slightly from her shoulder, but she held it in place and looked directly at Carver. That's what always happens here. Isn't it, she said? The person with the least power gets blamed for protecting the person with the most power. Caleb looked up, stunned. Kiara's voice did not shake. He was wrong to mark that file. But he didn't create the lie. He was handed one. Carver's face hardened. You don't understand how institutions work. Kiara answered. I understand exactly how they work. When everyone is scared of losing something. Grace Miller had been sitting near the end of the table with both hands wrapped around an old manila folder. Until then, she had said almost nothing. Now she pushed the folder forward. Sloane's eyes widened. Grace. Ms. Miller did not stop. No, not this time. She opened the folder and spread 3 incident reports across the table. Each one carried Damon's name. Each one described a student complaint, intimidation near the gym, harassment in the cafeteria, a locker room confrontation. Each one had been closed internally. And each one had the same final note written in neat administrative language. Camera unavailable due to technical failure. Damon's confidence cracked. Grant stared at the reports as if they were insects crawling across the table. Those were resolved. He said, Ms. Miller's voice was quiet, but there was no fear left in it. They were buried. Sheriff Bennett picked up the first report, then the second, then the third. 3 complaints. Same student. Same missing footage. He opened the last file. His eyes stopped on a name near the bottom of the page, Maya Rhodes. For the first time all day, Kiara's face changed completely. Her breath caught. Emma noticed it. Sheriff Bennett looked at his daughter. Kiara stared at the name as if the room had disappeared. Maya Rhodes was not just another student in an old report. Maya was the reason Kiara had transferred to North Valley in the first place. And now, the truth she came looking for was no longer hidden in rumors. It was sitting on the table, inside a folder everyone had hoped would stay closed. The small auditorium at North Valley High filled faster than Principal Sloane wanted as. Word had spread through the school before anyone could stop it. The West Hallway video existed. Damon Whitlock's voice was on it. and an old file with Maya Rhodes's name had just been opened. Students slipped into the back rows. Teachers stood along the walls. Emma sat near Kiara with her phone clutched in both hands, while Caleb Ortiz stayed close to the laptop, his face still pale from what he had helped uncover. At the front, Grant Whitlock sat beside Damon, whispering sharply into his son's ear. Vice Principal Carver stood near Sloan, with her arms folded, looking less like an educator and more like someone guarding a locked door. Sheriff Bennett did not begin with anger. He began with the file. Maya Rhodes was a student here last year, he said, holding up the report. Her family filed complaints involving intimidation, harassment, and missing evidence. The school closed the matter, citing lack of proof. A murmur moved through the room. Kiara kept her eyes on the floor for a moment. Then she lifted her head. Maya is the daughter of a deputy who worked with my father. She said she was scared when she left this school. She wouldn't tell anyone the full story. I came here to find out why. Damon stared at her, stunned. For once, he understood that Kiara had not wandered into his world by accident. She had been following a trail he thought had been erased. A video call appeared on the auditorium screen. Maya Rhodes's face came into view. Older than the girl in the file photo, but still carrying the weight of what North Valley had done to her. The room quieted at once. I didn't misunderstand anything, Maya said. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. Damon and his friends cornered me more than once. They took my bag, shoved me near the gym, and told me nobody would believe me, because his father paid for half the school. Damon shifted in his seat. Grant leaned forward. This is outrageous, he said. Sheriff Bennett raised one hand without looking at him. Maya continued. When my parents complained, Vice Principal Carver gave me a statement to sign. It said I was emotional, that I exaggerated, and that Damon never touched me. Carver's expression went flat. That is not accurate. Maya looked directly into the camera. You told me signing it would make things easier. You said fighting the school would ruin my year. Kiara's hands curled into fists under the table. Maya took a breath. Then Mr. Whitlock came to my house. He told my parents he didn't want my future damaged by a public conflict. He offered money for counseling, relocation help, whatever we needed, as long as we stopped making noise. The auditorium erupted in whispers. Grant stood so quickly, his chair scraped the floor. That is a lie. Maya did not flinch. I kept the recording. Caleb connected the audio file. A few seconds of static filled the speakers. Then Grant's voice emerged, smooth and controlled. No one benefits from dragging this into the open. Let us help your family move on quietly. The silence that followed was different from every silence before it. This one was not fear. It was recognition. Grant's face turned red. That recording may be illegal. He snapped. You have no right to play that here. Sheriff Bennett looked at him calmly. A court can decide what is admissible, but today, everyone in this room understands why the cameras always failed at the right time. For a moment, it felt like the truth had finally broken through the walls of North Valley. Students looked at one another, realizing that the stories they had whispered about were not rumors. They were patterns. Emma wiped her eyes. Caleb stared at the table. Ms. Miller lowered her head, ashamed of all the times she had stayed quiet. Then Principal Sloan stood. Her face was pale, but her voice was firm in the worst possible way. This hearing has become disruptive and unsafe, she announced, until further notice. Kiara Bennett is suspended for instigating unrest, bringing outside pressure into a school matter, and creating chaos on campus. The room froze. Kiara slowly turned toward her. Even Damon looked surprised. Sheriff Bennett's expression darkened. But before he could speak, a chair scraped in the back row. Then another. Emma stood first, trembling, but loud enough for everyone to hear. No, she said. You don't get to punish her for proving what you hid. A student near the aisle rose next. Then another. And for the first time in North Valley High, The silence that had protected Damon Whitlock began to break. Emma Collins stood with her knees shaking. But her voice did not break this time. "No," she said again. Louder, "You don't get to punish Kiara for exposing what you hid." The auditorium went silent around her. And for 1 second, Principal Sloan looked almost offended that someone so quiet had spoken without permission. Then a boy near the back row stood up. "Damon locked me in the equipment room last semester," he said. "I reported it. Vice Principal Carver told me there was no proof." A girl in a red hoodie rose next. "He shoved my brother near the gym." The camera was down that day, too. Then another student stood. Then 3 more. The room changed with every voice. Fear did not disappear all at once. It cracked piece by piece. And through those cracks came names, dates, hallways, threats, and reports that had been buried under polite phrases like misunderstanding and lack of evidence. Carver kept saying, "That is not accurate." But nobody listened anymore. Sloan tried to call for order, yet the word sounded ridiculous, coming from someone who had mistaken silence for peace. Grant Whitlock pushed his chair back and moved toward the side aisle, but a parent stepped into his path. "How much did you pay?" the woman asked. "To make sure your son was never disciplined." Grant's face tightened. "Move." Another parent stood beside her. "Answer the question." Damon looked at his father. Panic finally opened on his face. Dad Grant did not comfort him. He only snapped, "Sit down and shut up." That single sentence did more damage than any accusation. Everyone saw it then. Damon had learned his cruelty from a house where power mattered more than truth. Sheriff Bennett stepped to the front of the auditorium, his voice calm enough to cut through the chaos. "All recovered video, system logs, prior complaints, witness statements. And today's audio will be forwarded to the County Board of Education and the prosecutor's office for review." Sloan tried to object, but a district representative near the front stood and asked her to step away from the microphone. Carver's face went pale when she was told she would be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Caleb lowered his head, not in shame this time, but relief. "Ms.?" Miller wiped her eyes quietly. Everyone expected Kiara to demand revenge. Instead, she stood in Sheriff Bennett's jacket, still holding the torn edges of her shirt beneath it, and spoke with a steadiness that made the room listen. "I want every old file reopened," she said. "I want every student who was called a liar to be heard. And I want this school to apologize to the people it trained everyone to ignore." No one clapped at first. The words were too heavy for that. Then Emma began, and soon the applause spread across the room. Not loud, with celebration, but with release. Damon remained seated, smaller than he had ever looked. When the room began to clear, he approached Kiara with his eyes on the floor. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Kiara looked at him for a long moment. "You're not sorry because you understand," she said. "You're sorry because, for the first time, everyone finally saw you." Damon had no answer, and as Kiara walked past him, she knew justice would not be proven by one apology. It would be proven by what North Valley did after the crowd went home. A few weeks later, the west hallway at North Valley High looked almost the same, but it no longer felt the same. The lockers were still lined in long metal rows. The old trophy case still stood near the corner. The floor still reflected the white ceiling lights. But above the hallway entrance, a new camera watched clearly from a protected mount. And beside it hung a sign no one could miss: "Report bullying. Your voice matters." Underneath was an anonymous hotline number connected directly to the district office, not the school administration. Kiara Bennett walked beneath that sign slowly, wearing a new white shirt, blue jeans, and the same old backpack that had once been pulled from her shoulder. Students looked at her as she passed, but not with the same hungry curiosity as before. This time, they moved aside with respect. Some nodded. Some whispered her name, not as gossip, but as a reminder of the day the silence broke. Emma Collins waited near the trophy case, her phone held loosely in one hand. She looked smaller than usual, but braver too. "I'm sorry," Emma said before Kiara could speak. "I should have yelled sooner. I should have stopped them before it got that far." Kiara looked at the spot on the floor where Emma's phone had skidded weeks earlier. "You were scared," she said, "but you still recorded. You still stood up when it mattered." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Kiara gave her a small smile. "That video didn't just help me. It helped Maya. It helped everyone they convinced to stay quiet." At the end of the hallway, Maya Rhodes stepped into view beside Ms. Grace Miller. She had returned for a special student meeting, not as the girl who had been forced out, but as someone who had come back with her voice intact. For a moment, Maya and Kiara only looked at each other. No explanation was needed. They both knew what it cost to be believed. The investigation had changed North Valley in ways no donor plaque could cover. Damon Whitlock had been transferred out and placed into a rehabilitation program. Cole and Trent received severe disciplinary action. Linda Carver was fired after the district confirmed she had pressured students and manipulated reports. Principal Sloan was placed under investigation for concealing old complaints. Grant Whitlock lost his seat on the school's donor council, and every incident marked camera unavailable was reopened. But Kiara understood that the real victory was not in the punishments. It was in the students who no longer looked away. It was in the teachers who now documented what they saw. It was in Emma standing taller than before. Sheriff Bennett stood near the hallway entrance, not interrupting, not taking credit. He had protected the evidence. But Kiara had carried the truth into the place everyone feared. She walked to the locker where Damon had torn her shirt and placed her hand against the cold metal door. Then she smiled. From that day on, no one at North Valley High ever confused a black girl's silence with weakness again. And sometimes, justice does not begin with a siren. It begins with one person brave enough to say, "I saw everything." Justice didn't arrive because Kiara was the sheriff's daughter. It arrived because she refused to let fear silence the truth. One act of courage inspired others to speak, proving that real change begins when even one person decides enough is enough. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. What was the most powerful moment for you? And what would you have done if you had witnessed what happened in that hallway? If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of justice and standing up against bullying. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.